Hello, everybody from Canada. I'm Bartley Sawatsky, for those that don't know me, and I'm here today with Philip and Nathan Bryant. We are some people that go way back. In fact, 26 years ago, we started some work here in Canada. That work continues to go on today. We thought after 26 years it'd be good to give you a little bit of an update. No, we know that most of you know what's been going on, but it would be good to bring you up to speed on some changes that are happening here in Canada, personnel changes, focus changes that we want you to be aware of. Those of you that have been praying for us and supporting us over the years, we really appreciate all that you've done for us, and we want to just continue to keep you in the loop as partners with us in our ministry here. So we have Phil and Nathan here today who have been working with Assist. We're going to talk about that. But why don't we first just bring everyone up to speed quickly on what's been going on in Canada over the last quarter century.
Wow. Okay. Well, in 97, we moved here.
Yep.
98, we started Grace Community Church.
Community.
2002 or 3, depending upon how you look at it, we started another church in Milton,
Yep.
Which became the Village Church. And then in 2005, I moved out to Vancouver.
Yep.
And we started a church, Community of Hope. That was in 2007.
Yep.
And then we started a church in Medicine Hat, which is crazy, in 2011. And then you guys started churches over here, started to have some campuses going on over here.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of activity over the years. And yeah, things have been, it's amazing that you can remember all of those dates. I can never remember. I know I have a blur kind of how those things all evolved over time. But yeah, we have some things to kind of bring everyone up to speed on in terms of how things have been going here in Canada. One of the big changes that took place was in 2017, right? So those were kind of the evolution of how the churches, started. But in 2017, the Lord placed something specific on Nathan's heart.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, Nathan.
Yeah, well, I was trying to figure out what was the next step for us, and was looking at when we came to Canada back in 1997, we came with Grace Brother North American Missions.
Yeah.
And in the early 2000s, Grace Brother North American Missions really ceased to operate.
Yeah.
And we had to create a new identity, a new mission, and our fellowship didn't have it had go-to church planning, but that was going under. And when I found that was going to pretty much die, I said, well, Lord, what do you want me to do about that? I didn't know what that was, but through a process of engagement with the board of Go-To and with the leader of Go-To and just talking to different fellowship leaders, we created what's called now Assist. And so we took the ministry that we had for leading the effort to Canada, which was Grace Brother in Canada, and changed it to Assist Church Expansion. Mm-hmm. And we were still wanting to work in Canada, but now we were working all across North America, both in Canada and the United States. And we were broadening what we were doing beyond church planting, but also to help revitalize and restart churges in our fellowship.
And tell us how that's gone, because it's kind of crazy for those that don't know how Assist has really exploded over the last few years.
So it's been the Lord, because I had no intention. In fact, when we first started, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go and start catalyzing new church starts across the country. Mm-hmm. But as I started to go across the country, realized, wow, our fellowship is in big trouble, and we've been losing churches for a long time. When we came to Canada, I think we had 300 churches. Mm-hmm. We're now at 220 churches. That's a big difference.
Yep.
And when I went to some of the different districts, almost half as many churches as it used to be. Mm-hmm. So the Florida district used to have over 30 churches. Now it has like 13 or 14. Yep. Southern California used to have 32. It only has 15. So anyway, through that process of engaging our fellowship, I realized, okay, well, we can start new churches, but we got to stop losing the ones that we have.
Yeah.
And we started to look at what other denominations were doing, because this wasn't unique to our fellowship. All across North America, we were sure seeing this decline in churches.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the Lord just put it on our heart to want to see if we could revitalize and restart churches as well as plant ones.
Yeah.
And so over the course of the last 6 years, God has just been allowing us opportunity to work with over 40 or 50 churches in revitalizing and restart, and we've also been part of 4 or 5 different church plants. So God is just...
It's been amazing, and the reception within our fellowship, for those that aren't aware, has been amazing, because it's really accomplishing something fantastic, right? So anyone that's been at conference has heard the updates, and it's been really
Well, it's
really
all the
good.
Lord. I mean, to me, it was totally the act of the Holy Spirit to lead us to do it and what He's doing. It's what God's doing.
And I remember the initial conversations that we had when you were thinking about going into that. I'm thinking, oh, this is like someone that's been really focused on Canada. He's going to still help in Canada, but I knew that that would be meaning that you'd be focusing more in the States and so on. So, Phil, maybe you bring us up to speed on kind of how that has sort of impacted us here in Canada. It's been very positive overall in terms of, that development, but it has had some impact on us too.
Yeah, I think the big thing that I think, Bartley, is I'm really thinking about the idea of prayer.
Yeah.
When I moved from Toronto to Vancouver, we didn't have any money as an organization, Grace Brethren Canada at the time. In fact, the dollar was flat and we lost a lot of money because of that. But we knew that God called us. And so we went down to the States and we traveled about 3.5 months. And we visited, literally have these weird numbers. We went 15,000 miles. We visited 40 different churches, stayed in 50 different homes, my wife and my 3 girls. But the thing we were really doing was gaining prayer partners. And we gained 2,000 prayer partners before we landed in Vancouver. And then a year and a half later, God has this Baptist church help us plant a Grace Brethren church and now a Charis Fellowship church.
Yep.
Now, why does that relate to now? It's because, well, we had all this prayer base and God was really shining on us. And you guys were expanding over here at Renew, starting new campuses. And so when we shifted in 2017, we literally had 6 or 7 churches that were healthy and in progress and movement. And now we focus down in the States and then we turn around and all kinds of stuff is going sideways all over the place. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had so much going on, particularly since COVID, right? That really hit us hard. We had some transition that had already been happening in Medicine Hat, and that ended up not working out. But at Renew, we went from being 4 campuses and, in the 400s to 1 campus by the time we were through it for a variety of different reasons. But, and it's been tough, right? So there's been somewhat of a retraction going through that. It hasn't all just been COVID, though. There's been sort of a gradual, a fast but gradual decline in Canada in terms of Christian influence. And we've really lived through that. I mean, we went to France, earlier this year, the 2 of us, and had a great time just visiting so many of our churches over there. But we came away with a pretty, I remember looking at each other and just saying, wow, we can relate so much more in terms of Canada with what's happening in France. I mean, tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that we discovered in France was that for France, for literally decades and generations, there's been an antagonism against the church and a pushback. And it was like, I think the numbers were like 0.8% of France was evangelical Christian. Yeah. But in the last 20 years, that's changed dramatically. And the attitude that people have is no longer, there's more indifference. Right. They actually don't know what Christians are. Right. And so because they don't know what Christians are, there's not like this historical angst against Christianity anymore. It's just like, oh. And so now there's also not a negative perception. And what was interesting is now it's like 1.5% of people in France are Christian.
They're moving in a good direction. Right. We're going.
So our conversation was, we're really going, and we're not going down like this, we're going down like this.
Very quickly.
And in fact, there was a survey that came out from Outreach Canada. They gave us some information related to what's going on in Canada. And like in 97, when we were just moving here, about 40%, 25% of people in Canada would consider themselves non-religious.
Yep.
Now that number is 54% of all Canadians would not identify with any religion. Yep. When we moved here, 15% of people were going to some kind of religious engagement, whether it's Muslims, a Buddhist, or whatever. Now it's less than 7% of all Canadians go to some kind of religious engagement on a regular basis. Yeah. Forget evangelical, forget Catholic, forget Sikh, Muslim, everything together. Right. Yeah. Right. And so we're talking about incredible decline and interest in God or religion at all. And we're fighting a very different culture that's antagonistic against Christianity and antagonistic against us. And I want to take us back to the point I was making earlier, which was we had all these prayer partners focusing on Canada, and God was honoring that. And then we took all those prayer partners and we started to focus on the U.S. And now I don't regret our work as assist working in the U.S., but I have a very strong feeling that we're not wrestling with flesh and blood. Right. There's a battle in the heavenlies, and that's what kind of came up in our trip to France. I came back going, this is a spiritual battle. We know that, we can tell that, we can answer that on a piece of paper, but it's so obvious that all the destruction that was happening in Canada, there's human reasons, but there's a lot of spiritual reasons why that
for
is.
Sure. And the net result of all of that was we came back from that trip really recognizing that Canada is still a mission.
Huge.
Right?
Huge.
We're down to 2 churches again, even
Right.
though we were up to like 6 or more.
Right.
We're down to 2. We're self-supporting, the churches that we have, but we just don't have the resources to extend the mission beyond
Right,
that.
right.
So we have to just be realistic about that and see ourselves as a mission more like France is, and ask for help still, which is humbling, but it's reality. It's where we are.
I think
right?
for me, Bartley, that was what was happening. Phil was saying, Nathan, we got to focus on Canada. I'm like, we want to do Canada. We want to work in Canada.
Yeah.
But when we're doing stuff in Canada, now that we're working with 30 projects at a time, the 1 or 2 projects we're working in Canada, the noise of Canada is way down here.
We need to make more noise.
And so nobody actually knows that, or very few people probably know that we are doing work in Canada,
Right.
what the mission is in Canada, what's happening in Canada. And the need is quite different, right? So
Well, and you guys started talking
Yes.
around that time.
So
So,
that-
what were the
yeah, so
conversations?
I was like, okay, well, I just had a kind of an epiphany earlier this year. Like, man, I think we need to do what you're saying, Phil. We need to focus and make a mission for Canada, because in order for us to plant churches, more churches, to strengthen the Canadian churches that we already have, we're going to need outside resources to go and find those leaders, pay for those new church starts. That takes a mission. And it needs to be someone who can focus on that, give that energy and effort, who knows the Canadian field, knows the Canadian leadership, understands what's happening here, and also has connection with our U.S. support base to find those resources to help us get after that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So now, as of December 2023, we're making a shift where Assist is basically commissioning Phil to focus now on the Canadian mission. So tell us about that, Phil.
Yeah, I can't express how excited I am about that, because I feel like it's been burning all year long, and really the last 3 years watching what's happened in Renew and a lot of grieving, and then what happened at Medicine Hat, and then even the Community of Hope not really seeing what we're hoping for, and realizing I don't have any strength or energy because I'm spending a lot of time in the States, which I loved and enjoyed that work. And as Nathan said, that conversation that we had multiple times, and then realizing, okay, God, you can do something different here. If we focus, we don't even know exactly how it's going to be. It isn't like we have 13 high quality leaders ready to go plant 13 new churches. I mean, if God wants to bring them, you guys are out there, come on over, we'll take you.
Anytime.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we know that what we need to do is redirect. And one of the things I really want to do more than anything is I want to re-raise our prayer base.
Yep.
I want to see if we can get another 2,000, maybe 3,000 prayer partners that will join with us and help us. We're going to need money. We're going to need funding. We've lost, because the funding has been switched over to Assist, which was great, and we have no regrets about that. But that also means the money that was originally coming into Canada is no longer aimed at Canada. It's headed back towards the States. And we're going to need to re-raise resources to build our team, to see what God does here. And we're going to need favor. We're going to need favor from God and from our different denominations here in Canada. One of the fun things that I've been able to do over the last year was meet a lot of our denominational leaders in Canada, or, over the EFC or the Baptist groups or whatever. And there is such a need here that there isn't like a competition going on. There's how do we work together? How do we make this work? And so I'm excited about how we can partner with the other evangelical churches to make this happen.
Absolutely. So here's what I'm going to get you to do. Look right into that camera and make your pitch. What do you want from people? How can they connect with you? How can we get this ball rolling?
Well, I've been sending out emails, sending out all kinds of stuff, so please respond to those types of things. But I would encourage you guys to pray and gain prayer partners. Maybe at your church you can start a little prayer group for Canada. I know the Ashland Church has been doing this for years. The Winter Lake Church does this. And it's just so incredible how that makes a big difference. But your missions budget, some of you are working through transitions. We're going to need some help financially to make this happen. And then young leaders. You might have a young leader, maybe he's not a church planter, or maybe she's not a church planter, but they may have real gifts that can come up to Canada and help us. You might need to help fund that person to come. We'd appreciate that too. But there is work that needs to be done, and we're excited about it. But prayer is probably the highest thing. I would say if we can get 3,000 prayer partners that are not just signing up on a list, but actually praying for us, I think that's going to make a huge difference.
We want to make a distinction too. So Phil will still work for Assist on a smaller level, but he leads Grace Fellowship Canada. It's called the GFC, and that's going to become the Canadian mission, and looking to go to the U.S. and find resources, and outside, we'll take it from all over the world, but to help energize and re-energize and see new churches started here in Canada. Assist, we're still going to do what we're doing, and we will come back and support whatever effort's happening here. So if Phil is able to find a leader and get the resources to plant, we're going to come and help support that and help to coach and and catalyze that church planting effort as well. So we're still partnered together. We're still working together.
Yep.
But we're trying to see how we can still focus on what God is calling us to do, but really get focused on seeing Canada re-energized and new churches started here.
And the one thing I would want to say to you is that in some ways they're starting all over. Yes, we have 2 churches and we're thankful that they're actually still stable, and that's good, but we have to go back and raise re-support. We've got to find new teammates, and we've got to re-engage how we're going to connect with Canada, because like Bartley was saying, wow, we've got the situation where Canada is going like this, and there's an antagonism against Christianity like I can't even explain it to you. You think you watch other news shows and you think you've got it figured out. You haven't lived in Canada, and there's a reality to the antagonism against Christianity here, and we're going to need the Holy Spirit to do incredible stuff, and we need God's people to be part of that.
I'm kind of excited because some of this is going to feel like getting back to the early days when we were making more connections and having people come up and visit and some of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And we want to do more of that again. We think that there's some things that other people can learn by coming to Canada as well, because some of what we're experiencing, it's exporting all over the world, in case you weren't aware.
Woke what?
But yeah, exactly. So anyway, this has been good just to give everybody an update. We thank you guys for taking the time to listen and hear what's going on in Canada. Please do connect with us. Phil Bryant's the guy you want to connect with. You can always figure out where to connect with him. What's the best email address to use?
Well, the easiest one is philipbryant@outlook.com.
Very good. Awesome. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for taking the time and hear what's happening here in Canada.